Welcome everyone to our presentation of the Archive Alternative. My name is Wayne Hoyt and I'm one of the business development managers here at ITI. I've worked with PLM and related fields for over 25 years. Our hope is that we leave you with some insightful information as you consider your PLM and data strategies, and that we introduce ourselves as trusted partners in data migration and archiving, someone you can turn to with questions about your data. First, I'd like to give you a brief overview of ITI. ITI was founded in 1983 to foster interoperability for CAD, CAM, and CAE users. The idea is to make CAD data more readily available and more useful to larger groups of CAD content creators and consumers. We have 5 offices in the US and Europe, and in 2019 we became a wholly owned subsidiary of Wipro Limited. At ITI, we are integration experts and the preferred solution supplier for Creo, NX, ERP, and other integrations for our partners such as Aris, Dassault Systems, Siemens, and PTC. We are also data migration and archive experts with more than 16 years experience. Our dedicated migration teams focus solely on data migration projects and have completed more than 200 production projects to date. We migrate data from legacy engineering systems like SmartTeam, EPDM, ProInterlink, or unmanaged files on disk, as well as all of the major PLM systems like Aris Innovator, Dassault Innovia 3D Experience, Siemens Teamcenter, and PTC Windchill. Today's topic is the archive alternative, and here's our agenda, starting with what is data migration? Even though we're primarily going to talk about data archives, it's a good idea to have a basic understanding of data migration as a baseline. What is a data archive? We'll clarify the concept of a data archive, its purpose, and key factors. When is a data archive better than a data migration? While it sounds like a setup for a terrible joke, we really want to discuss why an archive can be a better solution for your legacy data. Next, we'll discuss the ITI archive as a solution to the problem of what to do with your legacy data when a migration isn't appropriate. And the wrap-up summary. Last, we'll provide a very brief summary of what we covered, followed by an open Q&A session. So let's begin. In order to understand why a data archive can be a good alternative to a data migration, let's first review what each of these are. What is a data migration? The most common migrations that we deal with are CAD data, which can be very complex structures and require a special expertise to properly migrate. Typically, migrations are from one type of PLM system to another, but almost any kind of data can be migrated from an old system to a new one, providing the new system is designed to handle the old type of data. Simply put, a data migration is taking the existing data from one system and transforming it to work in another system. Now, what is a data archive? You can think of it as a library, and like a library, an archive holds a lot of information that needs to be searched, navigated, and retrieved. Also like a library, when there's so much content, you need a way to find what you're looking for. In a physical library, the librarian regularly performs the search, navigate, and sometimes the retrieve functions. For our kind of IT-related work, instead of books and magazines, we have digital data, and therefore a digital library. And this digital library needs a user interface, a librarian, to search, navigate, and retrieve the data. While they don't actually contain the information, search engines like Google and whatever else is still out there act as digital librarians, providing a user interface and performing the search, navigate, and retrieve functions. A data archive is the best of both worlds, a local installation of the actual data plus a user-friendly UI for searching, navigating, and retrieving the data and related files. It's like a search engine for your legacy data. So how is a data archive created? Well, instead of transforming the existing data so that it works in a different system like PLM, a copy of the existing data is put into a self-contained, standalone, and read-only database. This copy of the existing metadata includes everything, all the attributes, relationships, revisions, and states. Then, on top of this metadata copy, a specialized user interface is added to allow deep searching, navigation, and retrieval of the data. Once the archive is complete, The legacy system can be shut down since all of the data is safely contained within the new archive. So on to our main purpose. When is an archive a better choice than a migration? Perhaps the most obvious time is when the data is no longer being modified, the idea being that you shouldn't migrate the data if there's no activity. Examples of this would be for obsoleted products or when acquiring, divesting, or closing a division. Another time when an archive is a better choice than a migration is when your data is governed in a highly regulated industry. Many times, you are required to keep data for an extended time to comply with regulations for the FDA, DoD, FAA, GDPR, and others. When you're in a situation where you need to shut down an existing database, you need to make sure that the associated data is preserved to maintain regulatory compliance. A data archive is the perfect solution, providing long-term data storage and access without the overhead of a PDM or PLM system. Speaking of overhead, another example of when an archive is a better solution than a migration is when the migration cost is simply too high. We know the cost of data migrations can get very pricey due to the nature of the work and the amount of effort involved in retrofitting legacy data to a new system. Migrations are well worth the cost and effort, but they might not be possible for smaller companies or smaller budgets. There also might be a significantly smaller quantity of data that doesn't justify the cost of a migration, but which is a perfect fit for an archive. Archive costs, by comparison, can be significantly lower and more affordable than a full-scale migration. Our last scenario for why an archive is a better choice than a migration is really several smaller reasons. The first reason is that it's entirely possible that the existing data doesn't need to be brought into a new system in bulk, but rather on an as-needed basis. Second is the case of a greenfield strategy, where the existing data might be used for a different purpose and therefore does not need to be migrated, but only made accessible going forward. Third is the case of CAD data, when there's a transition from one CAD application to another. For example, moving from NX to Creo can make it unnecessary to have the existing NX data available in the new platform. Fourth, there are cases where you might be moving to a cloud-based infrastructure and there's a need to minimize the data footprint. You know the old saying, you can't fit 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound sack. And last, whereas an archive means the existing data is copied and moved to a new hierarchical database, migrating data is always a series of compromises. Which data to migrate, managing attributes, relationships, revisions, and more. So how does ITI approach the concept of the archive as a final product? We extract the existing data from the source system using our toolkit. And using those same tools, we copy the data into our custom database schema with no loss of fidelity, and then store it all in a read-only SQL database. On top of the database is our DLI, our Digital Librarian Interface, that gives users the ability to search, navigate, and ultimately download any of the data contained in the archive. The DLI interface also provides the ability to work from use case-based access, mimicking the same processes previously used in the original system. Our DLI provides precise data access, for example, traversing a complex CAD structure exactly as it was stored in the source system. Once downloaded, the user is free to use this data as they see fit. Typically for CAD data, that means opening it in a CAD application, reviewing it, or modifying it, then perhaps storing it as needed into a common system like PLM. So last on our agenda is the wrap-up summary. Data migration is best for active data. A data archive is best suited when legacy data is infrequently used, for example, obsoleted or closed down, in a highly regulated industry where data must be maintained for long periods of time, costs for migration are out of budget, when you can bring data into the new system as needed and not in bulk, and when you are shutting down a system and don't want to compromise by migrating. If you have any questions about data migration or archiving, feel free to contact us at the information shown on the screen. Thank you very much for your time, and have a good day.